It's Halloween, but not as you know it.
Event 2. This house needs therapy.
This house is much the same as any other house. A grey stone path meanders its way to a strong front door, sturdy and resolute. Walls stand in alignment, each reaching out to greet the others at every corner, cornice and skirting. Doorways beckon you forward, from corridor to room, staircase to attic to cellar. The faded grandeur of this house whispers to us of moments now lost and events that can never again reveal to us what is hidden. The people who have walked these endless passages, secret or otherwise, now rest in places far beyond our knowing or grasp, silenced by their passing and the passing of time. And only the whispers remain. But even these seem out of place, not as the sound of a hushed voice and sibilant murmur. No. These whispers were never born from breath and vocal cord and tongue. These whispers are of nothing human, nothing natural. They are here, and yet not here. Yes, this house is very much as any other in chamber and liminal space. It offers no clue upon first glance as to how it may differ, except perhaps its windows are slightly darker, as if stealing away the light. Maybe the silence is a little too still and the air a little too cold. And if you're truly paying attention, you could have the slightest sense of a hunger. No more than a pang at first, but growing towards ravenous, towards yearning, towards a compulsion when it must feed. And when it feeds, this house is not the same as any other. Oh, Linda, I think we're here. I think this is it.
It looks like the right place. Do we have all our gatherers with us? Because it's going to be an adventure.
Oh, yes. I think everyone's here. Are you here? Are you present? Yes, yes.
As present as I'm going to be.
Fantastic. Oh, we could do with some tipples, but unfortunately we don't do tipples here.
Yeah, no, I think personally, I think I'll do the tipples afterwards because I need my wits about me.
Yeah, we're hunting for a spirit of a different kind tonight.
Oh goody.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. We're about to go on an interesting paranormal adventure. It's a bit exciting, isn't it?
Yes.
Into the
Yes.
ghostly,
I can't
ghastly.
wait. Ghastly.
It's normally ghastly. You're listening to me ramble on, but tonight will be more ghostly.
Oh, goody.
Ah, fantastic. And remember, Linda, we're here just on a visit. I know how
I
when you
can't
go,
stay. I can't stay.
no, I know how much you like to squat in strange houses.
Oh, you have to tell everyone.
Well, just in case they catch a glimpse. Um, but a very exciting adventure. I can't wait to go inside and to start exploring.
I I'm excited as well. Let's do this.
Cool. If you know a house or a location very well, if you visited it regularly with a group of different people, each of whom don't know each other, you will be granted the privilege of understanding that house or location very, very differently. You discover how to read that house's response to those inhabiting its space at that time. You'll notice that the same entities visit the same places, often using the same words or completing the same actions. So, in the everyday perspective, this may be viewed as a ghost haunting a specific area, or the spirit of a long dead person demonstrating a repetitive behavior as they wander through some limbo experience. It's not until you start paying attention to the members of the group that you begin to see another pattern forming. And this is one that is far more telling as to the nature of that place and how we as human beings navigate through it.
And it's interesting because now moving forward, when I do experience these types of things, I'm going to address it differently than I have previously.
Mm.
In a way that I'm sure is going to be healing for me, because obviously, if I'm picking up on it, it's an opportunity for me to look within it as well. We reflect, we're constantly reflecting. But it's making me think about places that have observed others having experiences that I'm going to want to go back to now
Yes. Yeah.
and see what crops up,
Yeah.
either from a sensory perspective or a reaction perspective of those that I'm with.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It's really exciting, the sort of complexity of that experience, in as much as if we visit a location that's deemed to be haunted or have
Yeah.
some sort of paranormal association, that we may feel a certain way or have certain experiences there, but we very rarely see beyond the surface. So even if we have a really tangible experience, that experience will be what it is. Even if we go back to a place time and time and time again,
Mhm.
we will likely have similar experiences because we know where to look and we'll constantly be looking in that area.
Yeah.
The difference when you are in a position where you can view other people in that environment time and time and time again, having experiences, is that when you pay real attention to what's going on and you stop looking at the ghosts or spirits, shall we say, for this example, when you stop looking at them and you start looking at the people, you begin to realize that some people will pick up on some experiences. And that tells you more about the people.
Right.
They can ever imagine they're telling you when they experience that thing with the ghost or spirit. So if they pick up on a particular entity in a particular place, they are telling you something about themselves
Right.
as to
Right.
the mechanism within them that connected into that entity.
Right.
And you are able then to say, with a certain amount of qualification, what is happening for that person or what is underlying for that
Right.
person.
Right. Yeah. It's providing you with a book of details
Mm,
when you look at it from that perspective,
yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
how much more effective you can be as a healer
Mm,
instead of letting the cycle continue. Not that you're doing it consciously, but until you're aware of what you're being presented, you can fine tune your own abilities in healing. It's pretty amazing.
yes, yeah,
It's
exactly.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. It's stunning how environments with paranormal associations are so triggering for people.
Yeah,
They hone in on exactly the aspect of a person's being, their psyche, their physicality, their memory. It knows exactly where to start resonating to
yeah.
bring things to the surface.
The trauma, there, yeah. This brings up a question, not necessarily a question, but a thought that just occurred to me. I will purposely avoid locations that have a history of negative activity. I just don't, previously, I just have no interest. I don't want to encourage that energetic signature. So I don't go. However, now I have a different point of view. Um, there's a location in Fall River. Um, it's the Lizzie Borden house. I'm not sure if you're
Yes, I
familiar
have
with that.
heard. Yes, I have.
It has a pretty dark history. I don't feel it's a fear that keeps me away. It's just pretty dark. It's why would I want to perpetuate that? However, now I want to go
Yeah, yeah.
because I feel like it's an opportunity to be able to walk into a place that has all this stuff and watch my reaction, my own first reaction.
Mm,
And what does it trigger within me?
yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that actually, because I've known quite a lot of people that have worked within the psyche ethos who have visited Salem,
Uh-huh.
and they always come back and say how healing the experience was for them, which is not something you necessarily expect when you think of Salem and what happened there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been to Salem several times. I feel great sadness there. I feel a lot of compassion for the
Mm,
victims. The location, the graveyard, the buildings, there's definitely a feeling there that I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that compassionate, that sadness of the injustice that occurred there. I never thought of Salem as a place of having a paranormal experience. Isn't that funny?
We have lots of locations in the UK that have very dark pasts, even
Yeah,
sort of mundane, everyday experiences of atrocity
yeah,
that just are everywhere, throughout the country. Everything from the crossroads and hills being used as gallows
right, right.
almost everywhere you go, and they have names like, they have like the Gallows Hill, things like that, or the Dancing Hill is one, where they used to dance when they were being hung. So it's given sort of quite a fun name for something which has a very, very dark
Yeah,
experience attached to it. But there are places here in the UK where many, many, particularly predominantly women, were murdered for witchcraft.
yeah,
And they are completely and intrinsically wrapped up in these experiences. I do find it fascinating how healing those places can be for all of the pain and the suffering and the trauma. There is almost a way forward for those who experience that. The temporal experience means that we can never go back and change that experience in our own reality.
right,
It's possible that we can change it for other realities, for things that, for futures that we will never know, i.e., presents that
right,
we will
right,
never know. But in terms of healing something that is intrinsically contractive about humankind, the nature of human beings, the experience of how unjust things can be,
right,
we can learn how to heal and how to be better moving forward because of the experiences that are so close to us in
absolutely,
those places.
absolutely. You're breaking the chain
Yeah,
from moving forward.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Not suppressing it, not covering up, not denying its existence or treating it like a historical curiosity.
right, right,
It's
right.
about tapping into those very real moments of suffering and recognizing that those very real moments still exist
Yes,
in the world now.
yes,
And through the courage to take that experience on and live it for a moment means that your natural healing responses begin to heal it within you.
right.
And when you go through that healing experience and you learn it, it gives you the, for want of a better word, ability to
Mm-hmm.
start healing it in the world now,
Right.
to stop it
Well,
from happening.
I totally believe that.
Mm,
Totally.
yeah,
It's powerful.
yeah, yeah. It's very much like, how the body learns to fend off a virus or a bacteria, some sort of microbe from contact with it. It's the process of inoculation or through having an infection and your body learning how to overcome that infection, how to fend off from it,
Yeah.
so that in the future, if you have contact with that again, your body automatically creates the antibodies to it.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn how to inoculate ourselves and therefore others from experiences of pain and suffering,
Right.
abuse, trauma, etc. But we have to first experience them for ourselves
Right.
to be able to do that. And we have to heal from it. If it's just there lingering like an open wound, we are unable to heal it for ourselves and therefore we can't heal it for others.
Right.
However, the moment we learn to start healing it for ourselves is the moment that we can start to heal it for others and the world.
Outwardly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's powerful stuff.
it is. Yes. Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
Exactly. It is really fascinating with this ability to be able to see or experience in some way, to get knowledge about somebody who, for example, has died and was a relative or known by somebody that you come into contact with. So you meet them, you get this experience, you see an entity, you see some form of experience, you have images in your head, there's something that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
You get fragmented information very often, like names or dates or places. Maybe you will see them and can actually describe them.
Yeah.
Some people see them internally, some people see them out in the room. And this is often seen as the ghost of somebody or the spirit of somebody looking after their living relatives. The way that we work with this and approach this in PsyQ is we are actually looking at a temporal connection. So we are literally reaching through time to when that person was living and can connect into them in that moment, with them, with the living person. And that way we are like voyeurs into their experience and into their lives. What really fascinates me is that it opens up a whole conversation around time and the experience of time, because we experience time as a linear narrative from past through to future.
Right.
And we are sitting within the present. We have hopes, dreams, desires, etc., fears, worries about the future. So we project into the future and what we feel that that may be. And we have memories of the past, whether they be cerebral memories, sensory memories, sight, sounds, etc. So we are constantly sitting in the present, looking backwards and forwards and creating an experience through the synthesis of that. As we go through time, we fix time into being. So when we observe the moment we are in, we fix it into reality. And
Yeah.
that becomes a fixed point in our experience. So we can't go back and change our own past because it is fixed into reality. What's really interesting when we come to the PsyQ experience is that that moment with that person is not fixed until you see them. And then it becomes fixed, which is why we can temporally blip with people that we don't know,
Ah,
because
interesting.
we haven't observed it. The person that you're meeting when you pick this up, they fixed it in their time.
Yes.
You haven't fixed it in yours, which is why you can reach out and go
Interesting.
through that blip and
Boy, that
experience.
totally makes it so much more not only understandable, but accepting.
Yeah.
Wow. And that explains the accuracy of the description.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't doesn't help the person hearing my describing it, but
But that's the wonderful thing, because when we think about this idea of being able to fix experiences into reality, making them real by connecting into them and observing them for the first time, when
yeah,
you have those moments when you can connect into a moment with somebody who in somebody else's timeline is deceased.
yeah,
So their relative, for example, has died and is no longer with them. But in your reality, you're actually peering through into their lifetime, which is happening in this moment right now. You're not peering back into the
yes.
past. It is literally one bubble to another bubble. These coexist, these bubbles. You know,
That's really wonderful.
it
Um,
is, isn't it?
it's wonderful, and this one particular situation, area, place, location that I'm thinking of. There were a lot of things that happened when I visit, and I've been there a couple of times, and there have been things that I've experienced that was not startled by, was not frightened by, but really didn't understand what I was actually seeing until right now. And it's that aha moment of like, oh, this is the experience these people had that I am able to see because I have not experienced it until now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And this is the joy of increasing your psyche.
Yeah,
The more
definitely.
you practice and expand your psyche, just as you increase your intellectual quotient, you can increase your psychic ability. This opens up a whole storyline of experience that you can tap into anytime.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of PsyQ and in terms of the temporal experience of PsyQ, 1605, 1876, and 2022 are all concurrent.
Right,
It is merely our experience of them that places them in a linear scale.
right,
In
right.
terms of their temporal experience, they all coexist and
Hmm.
are just lived through at different times,
Right,
which means that in our linear time, we feel that 1605 has gone.
right,
However, it is possible for people still to experience 1605 and
right,
actually live their lives through 1605 because, in temporal terms, all time coexists.
right.
And it very quickly becomes completely brain frying. Particularly when you try to visualize that. It's very, very VM, it's very Viridian method.
Yes,
However, when the more that you practice experiencing temporal blips, the
yeah,
more elaborate the experiences become until you can have full blown conversations in different time periods within your current time frame. And
right.
it is extraordinary when you get to the stage that you can do that. And it's not about speaking to a dead person or a spirit or anything. You are
No,
actually having a live conversation, just temporally differentiated.
that's so, that again is so wonderful. This person that I saw, this is we're talking about 150 acres of beautiful woodland in New Hampshire
Mm.
in the White Mountain area. So you're out there in the boonies,
Yeah.
and I think I'm part raven or crow, I swear, because I'm always looking down, looking for shinies or something unusual or something to pick up. And up north, there's a beautiful red pine that the pine cones are beautiful chestnut color on the exterior, but the interior, when it opens, is a ruby red.
Oh, lovely.
And this hillside, this mountainous hillside that I was hiking up by myself, I wanted to find some of those pine cones. And I was approaching a camp that the person had passed away maybe 2 years before. I basically asked him to help me out. I said, if I could just have a few of these red pine cones, I would really appreciate it. And literally a handful fell at my feet.
Oh,
And I went, "Oh, thank you so much." And when I picked them up and looked up, I saw him.
oh my.
And I thanked him, and it was very polite and a slight conversation, not anything too robust. I went on my merry little way. He went on his merry little way. And when I went back to the camp that we were staying, I expressed to this person who knew this man very well. I said, I think I saw so and so. And he just kind of looked at me like I had two heads. And I described him to him. I said, well, this is what he looked like. I don't know, maybe it wasn't him. And he kind of got white faced and he said, no, that's him. That's him. And I
Fantastic.
said, well, he was very nice. And I asked him very politely and he graciously gave me my red pine cones. And he said he was that way in life. He was very generous. And I thought, no, this was a great experience. Now, the way you're describing everything, it's a whole much deeper level of appreciation for the experience.
Absolutely.
Um, because I did step back in time
Yeah.
and encountered him because he lived on the mountain. This was he didn't he was self-contained and lived there. And so I experienced him in that brief moment.
It's wonderful.
It's such a cool thing. It's
And what I love is the idea of that man sort of returning home that day and thinking of the weirdly dressed woman that he gave the pine cones to, because that's the wonderful thing about the temporal differentiation, is
yes,
when we have those moments and these temporal blips where we are connected to somebody who is experiencing their life in a different time. The experience is a two-way phenomena.
yes,
And so, therefore, they are experiencing this too in their lifetime.
right.
And what's really quite extraordinary is you start to sort of reverse engineer that into what your experiences are. This is where we start to get to the VM
Mhm.
experience. And we start to think about how we can have these temporal blips from the future. And that's
Yes,
extraordinary. You're receptive and open to it as well.
yes. Like, oh my goodness. It's totally shifted my perspective into a much more expansive viewpoint.
Mm, yeah.
I mean, I've always dabbled, as you know. I've been dabbling for years here.
And I think that for me has always been the takeaway. Suddenly we open up these experiences and it becomes so beyond linear. You know, the
Yeah,
linear experience of living life is so one directional and so rigid in its terminology and its perspective. As soon as you start to transcend that and you begin to look at things beyond the temporal limitations that we place upon ourselves, it suddenly opens up this whole experience, which leads us down many, many rabbit holes and gives us so much more to explore in terms of our experiences in life.
right, right. Talk about unlimited possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How
But
many
that's
people, how many people, when you walk down a busy street, how many people are you passing who perhaps aren't temporally fixed in the same temporal experience as you?
yeah, yeah, it's just so cool.
The wonderful exploration of what traditionally would be seen as haunted locations. When we look at a location for as a house, for example, we see that house as being built, and then the people who have lived in that house over years, decades, centuries, in some cases, they all create this layering of time in a linear perspective, and it creates this segmentation of experience through time to the point where we encounter a house, maybe we visit it, or maybe we live in it for a period of time, and we feel in a linear temporal experience that we are going back through time and fishing backwards to all of these experiences. However, when we start to be creative with the temporal experience, we realize that all of these experiences coexist right from the beginning of the house to the end.
Right,
And so everything that ever happens in that house all coexists and is all happening in a single moment.
right,
It is merely our temporal experience that differentiates between one and another experience.
right,
And that is quite extraordinary, particularly when you start to become temporally detached. So as you start to disconnect from your moment right now,
yes,
you begin to experience all of these things happening and coexisting.
right,
And your brain will very often seek out the most relevant experience that's happened And that's where we have this experience of what are traditionally known as ghosts and spirits.
Yeah.
Because we unfix from this moment right now, this temporal moment, and whereas normally we would differentiate between this and 1605,
Yeah.
we stop differentiating. And in that moment, we experience some form of entity and have some sort of interaction within that moment.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff.
Absolutely.
Never have a boring moment.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no such thing as being idle. No.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh my goodness. I really enjoy visiting restored homes and National Historic Landmarks. A few years back, I spent a day at the Mark Twain House in Hartford, Connecticut. Today, after extensive restoration, it serves as a museum showcasing the life and works of Mark Twain. The guide who led the tour was excellent and had a wealth of information to share about Mark Twain and his family. The exterior of the house is amazing. Our guide shared a quote from Twain's biographer, Justin Kaplan, who has called the home part steamboat, part medieval fortress, and part cuckoo clock. The advertisement for the house tour states, "A house with heart and soul." And from what I experienced that day, I believe this to be so. Upon entering the entrance of the home, you immediately get a sense of warm welcome. There was an opening to the right which allowed visitors to not only view the drawing room beyond, but also to allow the light from that room back into the entrance area, which really added more to the warm welcome. There was carved dark tone woodwork and rose-colored walls decorated with beautiful silver and black stencil, all within this main entrance area. As we stepped further into the next room, we noticed more silver stenciling continuing, but this time it was highlighting a soft pale rose wall coloring. As our group entered the room, we gathered at the entrance alongside a large, almost floor-to-ceiling mirror set between two windows. This reflected the light everywhere in the room, which added to the pleasant reception we all felt as we stepped in. I observed the room's reflection in the mirror. I could see everyone in my group attentively listening to our guide as he proceeded to tell us details of the room and its purpose back in the day. I continued to look at the room through the mirror. I noticed I could see a doorway across the way into the dining room. Suddenly, I saw a man standing at that threshold. He was dressed all in white bushy hair and mustache. He looked quite pleased to see us all. He stood tall with his thumbs in his pockets. He was there one moment and vanished the next. We proceeded through to the dining room, which was dark compared to the bright drawing room, but not less welcoming. The room abounded with textures, from the carved room divider, ornate framed artwork, a large table covered in a lace tablecloth, surrounded by intricately carved dining room chairs, which seemed all set and ready for family or guests to sit at. It had walls carved with what appeared to be very heavily textured burgundy and gold wallpaper. I had to stop myself from reaching out to touch it, simply for the sake of the sensory feeling I knew it must possess. Of course I did not, and even if I wanted to, I'm sure our trusty guide would have reprimanded me in a very stern voice. The library was just beyond the dining room, and here's where I could feel the most family warmth. I envisioned family time with everyone sitting around waiting with bated breath for a story. The walls were lined with bookcases brimming with books, and many comfortable chairs one could simply sink into to spend a few pleasant moments reading. In one corner of the room, there was a daybed, and I thought to myself, that's where you'd find me with a book. The conservatory was just beyond the library, letting in light and the feeling of being outdoors, all the while being in the comfort of a cozy room. Heading back into the main entrance area, our guide directed us to make our way up the grand staircase. Here, the silver stenciling was very clear against the dark rose wall color, very reflective in the soft lighting cast by the vintage lamps. I stood back to let everyone else go ahead of me, as I wanted to see if my mystery person in white would show up again. Alas, he did not. But as I looked ahead and watched everyone climbing the stairs, I suddenly felt a gentle hand pressure on the small of my back. It was very gentle, and for a moment I felt like I had stepped back in time when gentlemen assisted ladies. I didn't resist the forward prompting, and I climbed the steps. But when I looked over my shoulder, I did expect to see someone. But no, there was no one there. We investigated each of the upper rooms on the second floor, and our guide continued to bring us up yet another flight. We were guided to what I feel was the icing on the cake. We all stood at the doorway to what we were told was the billiard room. Again, I let everyone step ahead of me so I could be the last one in. Suddenly, as I waited there, I got a very strong scent of cigar smoke and whiskey. Such a pungent scent, I kind of choked and asked my friend if she could smell the same. She said she thought it was from the guy who was standing in front of us. But that didn't settle well with me, because why hadn't I caught a whiff of the scent throughout the tour? I shrugged it off and stepped fully into the room. Being at the top of the house, the shape of the room was interesting. It had steeply pitched ceiling angles, and at one end there was a door opening up onto a small porch. There was a vintage billiards table in the center of the room, surrounded by comfortable chairs. A desk on the opposite wall had various period writing instruments. The room was bright and again very welcoming, with walls carrying the same tone of deep rose as the main entrance area. We were told this was Mark Twain's domain. He would retreat to this place to write, contemplate, and entertain his friends with all-night billiard playing. Next, what our guide told us kind of shocked me to a certain degree, because he said within this room was Mark Twain absolutely loving to smoke his cigars, drink his scotch, and so much so to the point where he and his friends would fill the room with blue smoke. I was taken a little aback, since I know our guide had not mentioned this prior to me smelling all those very scents before stepping into the room. As the tour concluded, I never felt what I experienced to be a haunting or a ghostly occurrence. I feel my experiences were a glimpse back in time. I hope to go back again. I actually look forward to revisiting his home, hoping to get a glimpse more.
I find it very interesting because usually extreme fear triggers a therapeutic need response. So the situation is often sort of in a dark, confined, unfamiliar place. The experience involves sensory impairment, so being trapped in some way and feeling very unsafe. And it taps into something very visceral and real for the person, a repressed trauma, unresolved situations or relationships, suppressed emotion. And their environment comes up to meet them like a mirror. You mentioned reflection there earlier. And they have this interaction in their surroundings. And if there is a person who knows what they're looking for in that environment, they can interpret that therapeutically. So that reflection comes up and they immediately see the therapeutic value within that situation. It can also happen in one therapy treatment. So elven hands, where the therapist reads the interactions directly from the client's experience, or in KRT, where synesthesia acts as a proxy for locations, objects, or other people. In terms of PsyQ work within a specific location, what most people see as ghosts or spirits are actually the proxies for treatment. So in most cases, the location, the entity, and the reaction of the person and their experiences all present you with clues as to what's going on for them. And you can treat them whilst talking them through some form of resolution for the entity. So we could look at it like the entity is a representation, a personification, or a manifestation of this open wound that they have. And when you heal the entity, you heal the wound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think of previous clients that I've had where they've encountered what they labeled as dark entities. And I knew it was their wound that they were seeing. And, you know, it's interesting as a practitioner, it's our responsibility to gently walk them
Mm.
to greeting themselves, because that's what this really is talking about. You know, greeting the wound, the trauma within, and gently adding the light. The more light reflected, the shadows are dispersed. You get to see what it is for what it is.
Mm.
That's the importance of going to a practitioner who is well versed and skilled in being able to do that in a gentle way, but also the one therapy programs for people to learn this, because we all encounter this.
Absolutely.
No, we've all had experiences in our life, and being well equipped to handle that, especially as time goes on. We things are getting much more complicated and much more chaotic. Having the appropriate tools to be able to walk through and break the chain when you can. It would be wonderful if we could flip a switch and everything is fine.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It amazes me how different modalities of therapy exist for different needs within the client group. So,
Yes.
in terms of when we think of something like a Reiki modality, it's very much associated with healing. So, when people think of a form of Reiki therapy, they immediately go to healing and well-being. And if you are in a position where you've identified that that is what you need, you will seek out a Reiki therapy for that, or some other form of therapy that will help you to work with that need and fulfill that need. However, if you haven't recognized that need for some reason, because something perhaps is so repressed within you, and a person is so traumatized that they've completely removed themselves from that experience and suppressed it, they may not recognize that they actually need treatment. And that's really where PsyQ comes in, because it is this way of using the paranormally linked environment
Right.
with a healing experience. They just don't really understand or know that there is a healing experience going on. They see it as a paranormal experience.
Right.
On a dark and cold autumnal night, just like tonight, the wind whistles a warning to those who hear it, howling through the windows of a dark edifice. The holes contain no glass or shutters to block out the constant stream of icy air. Having travelled across the wide ocean and over the desolate moor, this fierce gale protests as it is hindered by the high skeletal walls and jagged edges of a building whose blackness comes more from its reputation than from the stone of which those walls are made. This prison, this place of incarceration and torment and death, in its notoriety, the site of many injustices, whilst also standing testament to how the hand of Lady Justice can reach out to protect the innocent, those who lived safer outside these walls because of her actions to keep the guilty trapped within. Home to murderers and cut-purses alike, yet also those whose only crime was to exist at all. These lost lives still wander the winding passages and labyrinthine corridors of Bodmin Jail. Yet, these phantoms of shadow do not appear to everyone, seeking out only those who share their story, the seekers and unsuspecting visitors alike, who in some way reflect the suffering of the ghosts themselves. As a small band of travellers navigate a path through the jail, some with trepidation, others filled with excitement, a few with sneering indifference, the adventure unfolds, and the narratives long forgotten reveal themselves once again to those who are willing and able to listen. Upon a certain staircase leading to a particular parapet, the woman in blue ambles on her nightly path, bereft and weeping for the child she has lost. And whilst this habit is one she undertakes each night, and has done for centuries, she only appears to women in the group who have shared experience of loss and the most terrible tragedy a loving mother can face. As they weep together, they grieve and heal, until in a burst of brilliant light she is gone, and her companion in this moment of mourning for the shared loss leaves living, feeling lighter, and remembering the love that was there and can never die. And for a while, the staircase and the parapet remain empty, devoid of motion, except for the swirling dust caught in a zephyr for a brief time. Yet when another woman who has suffered the same pain arrives, so the woman in blue returns to make that same voyage she has made 100 times, and will do 100 more. However, when a woman who has previously met with the Blue Lady returns for a second or third adventure, she will remain completely unable to sense her ethereal sister, even when another woman in the group is grieving her loss whilst bathed in blue. Yet even so, there remains a connection, not to the woman in blue, but to the living, grieving companions in the group. Thus, women who know and share that meeting with the Blue Lady, the healing together of that pain, always once, just once. There is a kinship and shared yet unspoken bond. The momentary, fleeting glimpse of a woman who suffered and then who healed as she tumbled to her death, swathed in the blue of her baby's shawl. And this is but one of those who haunt this place, the lost and alone, the dark and dangerous, the frightened and the yearning. The little boy who seeks out a man in the group, only a man who suffered at his father's lack of love. "I can feel his little fingers holding mine," the man will say, as they weep together, the little boy who never knew adulthood, and the man who lost his childhood to the sting of being unloved. This seemingly endless cycle of father and son, abuse begetting abuse, is broken as two lonely and lost children find within themselves the courage of men. And as the boy fades, at last in peace from the love he has been given by the man heals his broken heart with the realization that he is enough. He can love enough for himself and for others. And thus, within this place, these walls that stand strong against the fearsome battering of the wind wrapped like a fist around the horror and the suffering, holding it inside, trapped and forever in a perpetual loop. For each new person who treads these halls and cells, there is a glimmer, but a small, faint sparkle of light that promises redemption for those who dare to love, to heal, to make themselves anew. There's something about the witching hour leads us up to midnight and creates this electricity amongst groups of people in haunted locations. It's as if it's sort of prime time for them to show the world their troubles, and the world gives them a chance to heal. When you feel that electricity, that trepidation and excitement, the group is ready to get to work. Interaction, trust, and compassion are key here. If treatments take place and the group is proactive in that experience, what I find fascinating is that they will be exhausted by 4 a.m. and very little happens after that time. If the group has not been receptive to the treatment, by 4 a.m., they're desperately looking for smoke and mirrors.
Interesting.
And what you tend to see here is some people are, they're just really aggressively trying to intimidate the entities. They're being really rude and swearing and trying
Yeah.
to provoke. There's talk of throwing stones or, give us a sign, if you're there,
Yeah.
throw a stone,
Yeah.
give us a sign, that sort of thing. Yep. And then people become more skeptical and questioning.
Huh.
So they start to sort of close down from the experience. So, how people behave after 4 a.m., if they haven't proactively taken part in the treatment, how they act then offers an insight into how they are relating towards themselves internally, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. It is a character study in how aggressive, dismissive, or paralyzed they are. People beat themselves up. They ask some form of higher power for proof of existence. They run around in circles, repeating the same old patterns of abuse, or they slice out any issues with surgical precision, maintaining how fine they are and everything is. So if you work with these traits of behaviors in treatment, when you are experiencing it after 4 a.m., they may be more receptive on another occasion if they take part in the process.
That's interesting. There's, as I've mentioned to you before, I've never facilitated a paranormal event, but of course, there's plenty out there that have. I mean, there's a lot of programs that you see, some paranormal team going out. And I have always found it irritating and fascinating that they would provoke. And I always thought, why are you doing that? What, you're not gaining anything by by doing this. If anything, you're just projecting what's inside. What is interesting to me is that in your experiences, you've taken groups out, and though one time a participant may not have been receptive, they come again, they may. So that tells me that the first opportunity for healing, even though it appeared to not be received or that they didn't take the initiation of it, something must have happened for them to, when they come again, to be receptive. So something had to be planted, opened within themselves to allow that trauma or whatever the, the, the cause of their injury, a need for healing, to percolate up. So you
Absolutely.
just never know is what I'm getting at. You can't say they're just being aggressive and provoking and they're not, that's just who they are, maybe in that moment, but you never know.
Yeah.
They may come around the next time and say, "Oh, I didn't look at it from this perspective," which is typical.
Yes. Yeah. On the experience of a paranormal event, shall we say, the time frames, leading up to midnight has a certain excitement about it and electricity in the air. And then there is this key area between midnight and 4 where much of the healing or therapeutic experience happens, the interactivity takes place. And depending on what happens in those 4 hours, if you have a really therapeutic environment and a really extraordinary range of healing processes go on, people are knackered by 4 a.m.
Right,
They're
right.
just out of it. They want to go to sleep. They want to go home. They're gone. But if people are not behaving like that, or there's individuals in the group who are not behaving like that, that they haven't partaken in this
Oh,
experience,
yes. Yeah.
and they're desperately trying to do it whilst also not doing it,
Right,
because being
right,
aggressive towards a particular entity is just demonstrating how they talk to themselves, what their internal
right,
chatter
right.
is like.
And resistant and
Yeah,
resist. So, do you feel those hours are there's something about those hours, or could it be any length of, 4 hours in any point of the day?
I think the body clock has a particular aspect and a particular part to play in this. So our biological rhythms
Okay.
are very much sort of significant here. I think also as well we have these sort of time frames such as the witching hour.
Yeah.
That's when things happen.
But do you
Midnight.
think that's because we're told that?
It's
That
because
historically we've been told this is, ooh, midnight.
yes, yeah, exactly. It's the midpoint, if you like, that is that space between the dusk and the dawn. But I do think that the 4 a.m. aspect is very important because that's the point where the body is resetting itself. And, as you're sleeping in normal sleep cycles, everything sort of comes to a head by 4 o'clock. And then you start going into the morning processes where your
Right,
body
right,
is
right,
preparing to wake up. The REM cycles are becoming shorter,
right,
and you're sort of preparing yourself to wake up. And I think when we're not sleeping, when we're wide awake and in this extremely provocative environment, that natural biological function that would be taking place if we're asleep is working in a different way, but it's interacting with the environment.
right. So the synesthesia is kicking up
Yeah,
where normally it wouldn't have as much exposure, awareness,
yeah,
from an awareness perspective, not obviously it's happening all the time. But that's
absolutely.
fascinating
Yeah.
because, as you know, I get up early.
Yes, yeah.
and And I was thinking about like how does that impact me? Like how in my day to day, how does that change how my body reacts from a synesthesia perspective?
Mm,
I'm not sure that it does because I've been doing this for so long that I think that's my condition set.
mm,
But thinking about staying awake beyond your sleep mode, that does trigger your body into being more receptive to a lot of things that you normally are not accustomed to, not aware of.
yeah,
So it's a neat experiment.
absolutely. Understanding how your body works, and particularly in terms of biological rhythms and sleep cycles,
Yeah,
and then transplanting that into a place where you are sleep deprived and
right.
placing yourself into environments that are particularly reactive or volatile, and understanding how your body is compensating between its normal processes and what it
Right,
does in the space of a sleep cycle,
right.
and then what it is doing to compensate for that in being awake and in this environment, which in many ways we see as unsafe. It is
Yeah,
quite primal in its triggering. So you're reaching into these parts of your brain that are very deep, very primitive, very primal, and you're provoking them. You're poking them with
oh,
what's going
absolutely.
on around you. And then you have this situation where you're doing all of this whilst not sleeping, and your body is trying to navigate that. Your mind is trying to navigate that. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting to see the relationship between sleep cycles, biological cycles, and what happens in a paranormal
And
situation.
add the chemical cocktail that's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Let's look at smoke and mirrors. I mentioned that earlier, and the idea of smoke and mirrors, which is very often what people seek when in terms of paranormal experiences. I see smoke and mirrors as being the sleight of mind, often employed by naive or not so naive professionals. And they range from trivial distractions, most minute of things, all the way through to, some tiresome dogma or outright dangerous. And I have seen professionals in the field say some very dangerous things to people in their client group or audience group. So, for example, people often ask about the difference between a Ouija board and what we would call the Zephyr or the human pendulum. The pendulums, the Zephyr or the pendulums, are a way of connecting to your subconscious to get yes or no answers. So you ask a question that is phrased in a way to say yes or no. And that's
Hmm.
simply it. They're very, very simple, and they rely on your conscious mind to be thoughtful, considered, and inventive with your questions.
Hmm.
The Ouija boards have letters that spell out words. And when you give your subconscious mind this, the users are tapping in to all of the horrors of the primeval mind,
Mm.
all of that conflict and famine and disease and pain and death. And they're connecting into all of this ancestry and all of these experiences that our ancestors have had and that we may have had, and that we are unleashing them in a completely unfettered way. And that
Right.
is extremely traumatizing and
Absolutely.
dangerous.
Absolutely. Because you're opening yourself up to an experience that you're not aware of, the force
Yeah,
that is behind it, the reality of what that means, what all of that ancestral experience you are confronted with. It's frightening, of course.
yeah,
And then what do you do with it? Which
yeah,
most people don't know what to do with it. When I was a child, my father was a devout Catholic, I don't know why, brought home a Ouija board. I know.
Hey, as you do.
And it was I still remember exactly what it looks like. It had a special spot in a little broom closet that, we weren't allowed to touch, but of course my brother and I took it out any opportunity we could. Uh, but even at a very young age, I had this I don't know if respect is the right word, but for lack of a better word, respect for what it was, and knew that, don't mess with this. I was aware that I was very sensitive, not knowing what that term actually meant, but I was and still am very sensitive. When you're not as in tune with who you are, it's critical not to mess with something you don't intuitively keep at arm's length.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, treating these experiences with respect, as you say, and dignity, and trepidation. If you're not feeling that trepidation, then there's something going awry.
Yeah.
The thing with our conscious mind is it knows limitation. It has boundaries. It's very finite in many ways. We like to think of our consciousness as being limitless, but actually it is very defined and
Yeah.
very restricted and restrictive in terms of the overall experiences that we have beyond our consciousness. And when you are tapping into these experiences, working with the Zephyr or the human pendulum, yes or no, your conscious mind is doing the legwork. This
Right.
is your conscious that is deciding what the question needs to be to get a yes or no answer. So
Right.
you're
Right.
limited by your imagination, shall we say, what
Hmm.
you can consciously recognize. The moment you apply words, you are giving your subconscious carte blanche to do whatever it wants and to say whatever it wants. And believe me, it knows no limits. It will
Right.
go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be deeply, severely traumatizing for people because it can give them messages that really not only are so far removed from their conscious limitations, but also deeply plugged in to their ancestral experience. So it
Right.
knows how to scare them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that simple difference of yes, no, and words makes all the difference.
Right. Be careful.
And when I see professionals basically advocating to go to places that people perhaps aren't particularly respectful of
Right.
and don't hold as sacrosanct. So they treat things like the Ouija board, for example, as profane every day. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a bit of fun. It's a game. It is like playing with fire. And
Yes.
I find that quite disrespectful of
Absolutely.
people,
I agree.
really. It's being very aware when interacting with professionals in the group, that you trust them and that you build a relationship with them where you know that they are respectful and that they have your best interests at heart and that they honor you and have real compassion and
Mm.
care for you because some professionals don't. And
Right.
their advice very often needs to be avoided.
Right. Right.
It's a very Disney thing, but if you've ever been on the Haunted Mansion in one of the Disney parks, there's a bit where at the end the narrator talks about the ghost following you home, um, and it is sort of quite an interesting one because this is something that I've heard a lot on paranormal events, where one of the professionals in the group will say to the group, "Be aware of an entity following you home." Or we have had entities following people home and they come to harm afterwards. And for me, that's something really pernicious to
Yeah.
say, because again, you're giving the subconscious carte blanche.
Right.
You're not treating the subconscious respectfully or recognizing the power of the subconscious. You're literally saying,
Go
"Oh,
ahead.
you can come out to play whenever you like."
Absolutely. Right.
And it is really important. People do go searching for the smoke and the mirrors, and there are some professionals, not all. There are some very, very professionals out there who are very compassionate, who
And
are very focused
respectful.
and
Yeah.
respectful, very focused on the value to
Right.
the audience and of helping the audience in some way. But there are those who are not, and it can be completely naivety. It may not even be with foresight, or they don't even know what they're doing. It's just
Right.
literally they're very naive,
Right.
but they can say things from their place of professional responsibility that does not respect the power of
Mm.
our subconscious mind and what that can tap into if it sees fit. And when we're talking about in terms of therapeutic environment, when you are using a location as a therapeutic proxy,
Mhm.
you are confining it to that location. The moment you say to somebody in a vulnerable position, that ghost can follow you home, you're literally saying that healing experience can come at any time, at any place, throughout any aspect of their lives. And you take off the limitation. But as we know in therapeutic sessions, the more you focus something, the more effective it is. If you don't focus it and you just let it out of its box to do whatever it wants, it becomes very diluted, very convoluted.
Right.
That often makes it stronger. And the treatment goes on for longer. It's not quickly done, dusted, that's it.
Right. Right.
We've
Right.
achieved what we want to achieve. It just lingers, doing a little bit here and a little bit there.
Right. Right.
And that's quite challenging, I think.
Yeah.
A car speeds along a road, licked by the savage flames of a field on fire. The sound of Berlin's song "Take My Breath Away" plays as the car manoeuvres to avoid the flames that gradually envelop it. As I began to wake from my slumber, I wondered why the TV was on in the early hours of the morning. The Peugeot advert was almost as prevalent on the television as the song itself was in the charts. I squinted, still gripped by a slumber, watching the dancing of flames around me. Yet the flickering was more than a small TV set. They were all around, ahead of me, to the sides. The song began to distort and warp as I struggled to move, gripped by the paralysis of sleep. I could smell the smoke, taste it, and I knew this was not an advert I was watching, but a real fire. My mind, in its sleep state, had made some strange humorous connection between the flames and the song. And, as the subconscious mind does like to play on words, or in some cases situations, it delivered a cheery soundtrack to the imminent danger of death I faced in this moment. Unable to move, the song faded completely, and just the crackle of the fire that raged around me remained. It was at this point I remembered the room full of people that surrounded me. I could sense my friends all sleeping and completely unaware of the peril that we shared. So again I tried to move, but my body stayed gripped within this deadly paroxysm. That evening, we had, my friends and I, giggled away with excitement as we cut pieces of paper into squares and wrote the alphabet and numbers 0 to 9 upon them. Finally, we took the 2 remaining cards and scrawled yes on one and no on the other. Our makeshift Ouija board was topped off by a small glass tumbler that would act as proxy for our lack of a planchette. With an air of nervous excitement, we began our communion with the dead, speaking in fragmented minutes with random names and glimpses of those we have loved and lost. However, the glass moved slow and kept juddering to a halt. Until it came. We had no idea who it was, although it made its intentions very clear from the outset. It was somewhere in the building, another apartment that it called home. The tenements of Somerstown in London have a long and dubious history. The Somertown slums were notorious for their poverty, violence and murder. Many a discarded child and broken adult lived shoulder to shoulder with thieves and murderers. It was the heritage of this place that carried through the social housing apartments that now stood in their place. This place where I was hanging out with my friends from college. Drunk on alcohol and laughter, we had, as a group, woven our conversation to a destination, an end point that meandered from belief in ghosts to lost relatives to communication with the dead. And this terminus of, how about making a Ouija board? We had all agreed this would be an amazing, extremely wonderful and highly safe thing to do, as only a group of teenagers can. The board was constructed and the thing awoke. It listened, and when the time was right, it spoke. "I'm coming," it said as the glass began to glide in circles across the tea tray board. "I'm coming," it repeated again and again, each time finding a smoother path to the letters I and M. None of us knew who we had gleaned the attention of. C. O. Which terrifying human being, long since deceased, was now interested in us? What unspeakable demon was at this very moment heading our way? M. I. We looked startled at each other as the inevitable question was asked by one friend. "Who's doing this?" And the equally inevitable reply sounded in unison as we all said, "Not me." N. G. The glass changed direction as momentum built. Closer, it spelt. Closer. My mind swam as I, in my sensitive way of being, could feel an electricity, a vibration, a force that seemed to be pressing on the walls, floor and ceiling, as if I was being crushed by an all-encompassing pressure. Closer. I had an internal vision of some dark shadow rippling its monstrous hulk from flat to flat, melting through walls like water through paper, growing, feeding on our fear as it moved ever nearer. I had initially sensed it a ways off when it first moved the glass, but had dismissed that experience as my imagination playing tricks. Yet now it was everywhere, undeniable in its power and suffocating in its proximity. "I'm coming." Again it repeated in a change to the familiar pattern of letters. "I'm here," it said with a scream of the glass that was wrenched from our fingertips and bounced off the wall with a hollow thud. We all watched as the glass came to rest beside us, upturned and appearing to us now as less as a receptacle and more a doorway that had just let something in. There was a silence, just a heartbeat of motionless quiet before we all leapt into action. The cards were swept up and carried to the kitchen, where we burnt them in the sink, washing the glass and tray before placing them away in the hopeful safety of a cupboard. All exhausted and rather afraid of what we had just experienced, we settled down on the sofa and chairs and carpet, ready to sleep. Was it an ember, some dancing fay from the burning paper that started the fire? Or was it something more sinister? We shall never know. Yet the flames did not care for the cause or explanation. They simply consumed with ravenous tendrils of fire. I pulled myself from my paralysis and cried out to my friends, who all began to stir. Moments later, we were rushing around in some barely contained panic, filling a bucket and cup and jars with water to douse the flames. And when we were done, and the flames were gone, and the smoke began drifting through the open windows, we were left with a sole reminder of our sojourn into the unknown. Burnt into the wall, patches of charred paint and plaster found a perfect balance of light and dark to create a face. The face of a man who stared out at us, watching and grinning with an unspeakable malice. In his charcoal eye, a glint could be seen, the small dent that had escaped the fire's fury, a dent where the glass had struck.
When you're on a treatment couch, so when you, or say, for example, a client is on a treatment couch, they are giving their permission for the treatment to take place.
Right.
Therefore, accepting and recognizing the experiences of being touched is something that is very natural to the client in that experience. They expect to be touched.
Right.
And it is not shocking or unexpected if the therapist slightly touches them at some point. So they open themselves up to this therapeutic treatment, and in terms of Alvin hands, the touching takes place and they are receptive to that, and the treatment is very effective in those scenarios. If you're not open to that in terms of a therapeutic environment and being on a couch and having that treatment, what better way for you to heal than to have a ghostly entity place a hand on your back. What most people identify as creepy or spooky in terms of hauntings, there is this very benevolent and compassionate side to the experiences.
Oh, absolutely. And I honestly, I don't think aside from childhood experiences when I was not aware of what the heck was going on, the encounters I had as a child were very frightening, extremely frightening. Um, as I grew and embraced it as best as I could, the fear of that unknown dissipated. Now and I hope I'm not opening up a bucket of worms or opening the doors. Literally, I'm not frightened by encounters.
Yeah.
Is it because of all the trauma in my childhood? Maybe. And that has healed because now I know so much more of what I was experiencing and allowed the dogma and the superstition to be chiseled away, literally. It's not always a matter of resisting. It's unaware.
Yeah.
Unaware of the opportunity of healing is every moment.
Yes, absolutely. And in terms of those environments that are paranormally linked, we can become very open and receptive to healing and to those growth experiences that take place within those environments. Even places with really dark histories can be very therapeutic,
Right.
in terms of the experiences that we have there. And very often in those experiences, I've seen more people than I can count have screaming fits if they get touched. Like if something touches them, they will absolutely
Lose it.
utterly,
Yeah.
they'll lose their shit. Because it's unexpected. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
People that I've trained in one of the PsyQ modalities, BVP, Energies V psychic, any of these modalities, because there is this understanding of what's going on at a very deep level. Immediately the practitioner will become receptive to that, know what's going on, and relax into it, and it is remarkable what then happens.
Yeah.
The sense of benevolence and compassion that can be found in the darkest, scariest holes on this earth is quite revelationary. It's just wow, that this can happen, and completely not what is expected.
Not what you're anticipating is going to happen. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just simply that comes from assertion, from the assertion that there is a different way of viewing this, which is not scary, not spooky, not things that go bump in the night,
Right.
but actually very healing and very constitutional to us.
So many times we talk about maintaining that childlike wonder, but sometimes that child needs to be comforted to know that everything is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just that gentle assertion, really.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. It's transcending the monster under the bed.
Yes.
In many ways, those childhood experiences of the paranormal, the frightening, the scary, they do come from a very real place within us.
Yes.
We bring a lot in terms of our genetics into this world. We, from the moment we are born, we are dealing with a heritage of humankind, and we're processing that. And the world is trying to help us learn. And very often we project some of that out into the world, be it locational, be it situational, be it relationship based. We project it out to try and get some form of external perspective on it that helps us to understand it.
Right.
And so when a child is projecting the monster under the bed, which can be very real because the childhood brain doesn't differentiate between real and not real.
Mm.
And so when they see the monster, it is real. It's in the room with them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it doesn't feel like an imagination. It feels
No, it's there. It's there.
it's there. It's there. But that very often is a projection of something that they're processing internally, that they're working through. And so that different perspective of understanding that there is a therapeutic value in helping the child process that monster under the bed and making it less of a monster and more of a guardian, a strength, a power within them that they can grow through and learn through and then use as a life skill.
Yeah.
That's a very different perspective to the norm, which is
it's
actually
liberating. It's so liberating.
Definitely. And the normal process there is either to completely dismiss it and suppress it, not to look at it, to shut it away.
It's not real.
Not real. Or to actually traumatize the child even more by going down that route of sort of the supernatural and the sort of the ghostly. But when we pull it back to a benevolent therapeutic experience and we focus it into that arena, suddenly it becomes so empowering for us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it, Linda?
Yes. It is difficult leaving. I really would like to stay. And maybe I'll just come back.
Stay and squat a while.
Yeah, you know.
Do you know what I fancy? I fancy one of Cornelia's tipples.
That sounds delicious. I'm sure she'll whip something up that's quite hocus pocus for us.
Fantastic. Off to the tavern we go.
Off to the tavern.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope you have had a wonderful time in this most strange and unusual house that most definitely needed therapy and probably got some.
And hopefully we'll visit again and more will be revealed.
Yes, definitely. So until we meet again on some strange and unusual road,
be enchanted.
Enchanted.
This podcast is freely available, and we are delighted that you find it intriguing and valuable enough to journey with us to this point. When you are ready to experience the Power of One therapy, its tools, techniques and perspectives for yourself, visit the Realm of Romanos. Go to www.one-therapy.com and start your adventure today.